A little while ago, I did a video titled Child Abuse: What Can Happen If Someone Was Abused as a Child? And now I'm going to look at what can happen if someone was neglected as a child. And I will look at a number of the different consequences that can arise. And although they are mentioned individually, each one can merge into another, or many of them. So even though they are separate, they all work together, or can do. So one of the things that can take place when someone was neglected as a child is that their brain might not have developed properly, and as a result of this, it can mean that they have trouble handling their own emotions. They can have memory problems, trouble recalling certain things. They can have trouble when it comes to self-awareness. And of course, if someone was neglected as a child, it's going to be a good thing for them to have self-awareness so that they can move forward. Because without this, they can end up being trapped. So one of the things they need as a result of being neglected is very often the thing that they won't have. And the next thing that can come from being neglected is that having problems with the brain in their stomach. So not only can this mean that they can have stomach problems, so irritable bowel syndrome and all those kinds of things, but it can also mean that the brain chemicals in their stomach won't be produced in the right amount, because it has been said that over 90% of serotonin is made in our stomach, the enteric system, and over 50% of dopamine. So this again is going to affect their brain up top. And another thing that someone can find if they were neglected as a child is that they have a weak sense of self. So they can have trouble with boundaries. They might not know what their needs are. They can have trouble connecting to their feelings. And they can find that they are basically like a chameleon. So instead of asserting themselves and expressing who they are, they can basically become like others. So they will merge with their environment. And they can find it very hard for them to maintain who they are. To feel whole like a one human being. They can feel fractured. And they might not know who they're going to be from one day to the next. And another thing that can happen is someone can be loaded with toxic shame. And this is because through being neglected as a child and even as a baby, they can believe that it was because of them. And this is because they were egocentric. So it was then not that there was something wrong with their caregivers or their caregiver. Perhaps they were shut down or there was something going on for them. It was that they were left because there was something wrong with them. So this is then not just going to be a feeling, it will be something that will have permeated their whole being. They will feel inherently flawed. And this can of course lead to depression, lead to feeling suicidal because they feel so worthless. Yet there will be nothing that they can do because it can just seem as though this is them. So it's not a feeling, it's not an idea, it's not even a belief. It will be seen as who they are, an inherent part of who they are, just like their arm is part of them. This can be seen as part of them too. And so also on the big things through being left, they can have big problems when it comes to feeling rejected and abandoned. They can have a massive fear of being abandoned. So if they're in a relationship, if they're not always in contact with someone, or they don't hear back, they can feel as though they're going to be abandoned and they will die. And again, this is not just a fear of abandonment because they were left. So they will also be carrying the pain of being abandoned, all the trauma, all the extreme pain of being left as a child. So this can make them very needy, very clingy, and they can end up going for the wrong type of people because they won't want to be alone. So it can be a case of anyone will do, because they won't be thinking, is this person a good match? Because that part of them can be offline, and their emotional self can end up taking over. And this can end up overruling every other part of them. Because it won't just be their need to be with someone, it will be coming from their need not to die. And being alone, being by themselves, can be seen as something that will cause them to die. So, and this then goes into the fact that because they were neglected, and this touches on the weak sense of self, they won't have a strong core. So they will be someone who is dependent and not interdependent, or in the so-called independent. Even though we're all interdependent, so they will be extremely dependent. They might even be labelled as having a dependent personality. And that's because they won't have a strong core within them. And they can also find that there are moments when they feel emotionally numb, and that it is hard for them to connect to how they feel and what their needs are. And this is because, as I mentioned previously, their brain might not have developed in the right way, so they won't be able to regulate their emotions. So they can then either be completely overwhelmed by them, or they can shut down. So instead of being like a big ship on the ocean and having the odd up and down, it can be like they're a very small boat on the ocean, so they'll be tossed all over the place. And their emotions can be far too much. It can seem as though they are just emotions and nothing else, because there'd be no, let's say, stabilizers to settle them down. And of course this can then mean that they will be drawn to alcohol and drugs and things like that, and be labelled as having an addiction, when in reality they are simply in a bad way, and they are using these things to settle themselves down. And another big thing as well is someone like this can feel as though they are invisible. And this is because when they were younger, they were neglected, so they wouldn't have been seen and heard, which is two important needs for a child and an adult. But they would have been overlooked, so they can feel as though they don't exist, as though they're not actually here. And on the flip side of this is that although they can have the need to be seen, they can also fear being seen because of the toxic shame and the fear and anxiety that they carry as well, and the terror. So although they can have this need to be seen and heard and experience a lot of pain because this doesn't take place, they can also fear it. And if they're not aware of this part of them that doesn't feel safe being seen, they can end up feeling like a victim, as though someone out there or something out there is trying to hold them back, but it will be what is taking place within them. And the other thing, something I just touched upon, is that they can carry a lot of fear and terror. And again, this will be normal because through being left as a child, they would have been in a lot of fear and terror because they wouldn't have had the ability to regulate their emotions. and they wouldn't have had anyone there to soothe them and to allow them to develop this ability so they can carry lots of fear, lots of terror. And so these are just some of the things that can take place if someone was neglected. But even without going into the others, this is clearly a lot for someone to handle, for someone to try to survive, because with all this going on, they're probably not going to be able to thrive. They probably won't enjoy life or see life as a blessing. It can be as though they've been cursed, as though life is a burden. So what I will say to anyone, to you, if you were neglected as a child, is that your life doesn't have to be this way forever. It can change. But for this to happen, you need to reach out, you need to look for answers and to keep going till you find the assistance that you need. Because the fact is, you didn't deserve to be neglected. So please reach out for the assistance of a therapist or a healer or a support group. Look online, look through books, any information you can get hold of, and keep going until your life changes, because you deserve it, and what happened wasn't your fault.